we're very happy to talk to our research community about the changes that will come into play from the 1st of January, and just handing you over to Irini to start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patricia. So I will share my screen. Yeah, I think you should be able to see it now. So thank you, Patricia, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I will start talking about the current state of open access in the HRB, and then I will talk about best practices internationally, which is obviously led by Plan S. And I will end with the changes we will introduce in the HRB Open Access policy from the 1st of January 2025. Finally, we will also have some questions at the very end, as Patricia explained already. So the HRB is committed to drive the open research agenda for health research in Ireland, as it is highlighted in Action 3.6 of its current strategy. And of course, open access is an integral part of open research. So at the moment, the HRB is committed to open access through its current policy on open access to research publications that, as explained by Patricia already, is in place since 2014. And this policy requires all publications resulting from HRB-funded research to be deposited in an open access repository. So furthermore, and in parallel, the HRB also offers an open access platform called HRB Open Research, which is free of charge for HRB-funded researchers and free of charge for readers as well, of course. It allows to rapidly publish research outputs in an open and accessible way. So this platform is fully compliant with HRB policies, and it follows a diamond open access model that I will explain later. As you can see in the picture, you can publish a variety of research outputs through the HRB Open Research, and you can find more information at hrbopenresearch.org. So if we look at compliance with our current policy, and we have looked at it through the National Open Access Monitor, which is in a pilot state at the moment. As per September 2024, 74% of HRB publications were open access. And even though this percentage is one of the highest when we compare with other funders in Ireland, it is still not 100%, even though we are already mandating open access through our policy. And this is also one of the reasons we wanted to update the policy to try to support researchers publishing open access in a better way, and also improve monitoring and compliance with the policy. So I'll move on now to look at the international landscape on open access. And of course, we have to focus on Plan S. As many of you already know, Plan S is an initiative for open access publishing, and it was launched in September 2018. The plan is supported by Coalition S, which is an international consortium of research funding and performing organizations. So Plan S in itself is not a policy, but it is a set of 10 principles around open access and also guidance towards their implementation, which is a very important part. It has long been our intention in the HRB to revise the open access policy in line with Plan S principles, and this would also align with the open access policy and practice in SFI, which is a Coalition S member. But we've deferred for a period in order to learn from SFI about implementation aspects of the policy in Ireland, and also to integrate our approach with developments on HRB variations and also the budget framework discussions. But the HRB then now is in a transition phase, and we are aligning with the existing Plan S principles with this new policy. but we are not currently a Coalition S member. We are aware that Plan S is also in a transition phase, so we will reevaluate options for membership as Plan S evolves. But if we focused at the moment, what Plan S is requiring, it's from 2021, it requires that all scientific publications that results from research funded by public or private grants must be published in open access journals or platforms or made immediately available through open access repositories without embargo. It also requires it to have a CC BY license. So a bit more specifically, as I said, Plan S mandates open access to be immediate with no embargo, and publications should be under a CC BY license. It also doesn't allow hybrid models except when transitional agreements with a defined end period are in place. Pricing, contracts, and publication fees should be transparent and in line with the services provided. Funders commit to support such publication fees, and therefore individual researchers don't pay at all. And finally, Plan S members have to commit to assess research outputs based on intrinsic merits and not based on the venue of publication merits or any quantitative metrics. And this last point is fully aligned with the research assessment reform and QARA, of which the HRB is a member. So, as I said before, there are 10 main principles that Plan S relies on, and you can find them here in this slide. They include, some of them already touch upon some of the topics I've mentioned, but they include copyright, service criteria, incentives, publication fees, business models, transparency, application, transformative agreements, monitoring, and research assessment. So you can find more information about all of these principles by accessing the Plan S website. So going into how to publish open access, there are different routes available for researchers. And while all of them will result in open access publications, the requirements or the steps that a researcher or an author has to follow are a little bit different. So first of all, in the top of the slide, you can find the Diamond Open Access route, which refers to publishing in a journal free of charge that is entirely open access to readers as well. So the HRB provides its own open access publication platform following a Diamond Open Access model. As I said before, it's the HRB Open Research Platform, and it is fully compliant with the current but also the upcoming HRB policy on open access. Then we also have Gold Open Access, and this route involves making publications available through the publisher's platform. So in this case, it's often requirement a payment of the article processing charges, and these are also called APCs. We'll mention them again later in the presentation. The next open access route is the green route, and it involves depositing the author accepted manuscript in an open access repository. So the author accepted manuscript is actually the version of your work that was accepted for publication and includes all the changes that were made during the peer review process. And this route is also referred as self-archiving. And last but not least, we also have the hybrid open access model that in principle, it won't be allowed in our new policy, except when a transformative agreement with a defined endpoint is already in place. So in Ireland, we have IRL, which is the consortium of Irish research libraries, and they have negotiated a number of transformative agreements with publishers. So this means that you may be able to publish open access in a hybrid journal free of charge. So please check with in the IRL website, or also contact your institution's library service to check which transformative agreements you can avail of. So next, I would also like to touch upon the Creative Commons licensing, because this is very important to retain your authorship rights. So in the bottom right of this slide, you can find a guide to Creative Commons for scholarly publications and educational resources. And the picture that you see, it is a table where you can find all the different type of licenses that you can avail of. Plan S requires the use of a CC BY license. This is the one on top, and it's the most liberal of all CC licenses. And that's because it allows others to distribute, remix, tweak, and build upon the work. But of course, provided that they credit the author for the original creation. Okay, so now I'll go through the changes that the HRB is introducing in its new policy, and they will be in place from 1st of January 2025, as I already mentioned. So the revised open access policy was approved at the beginning of September this year, and it will be effective for all publication submissions from the 1st of January. The revised policy will be accompanied by an open access publishing guide and also a comprehensive FAQ list. And this will draw on Coalition S and SFI experiences on implementation. We also accept that there will be a bedding-in period for implementation of the policy, and this will be reflected in our monitoring approach and also in our FAQ document. You can find here a summary of all the changes that are included in our revised policy. And first of all, the policy will apply only to peer-reviewed research articles, conference proceedings, and review articles. And they will have to be made available open and without embargo immediately. And while SFI, for example, does not include review articles in their policy, considering the role of the HRB in research and evidence support systems in Ireland, we preferred the approach of UKRI, where examples of review articles include evidence synthesis, systematic reviews, systematic literature reviews, analysis, meta-analysis, and meta-synthesis. So these will be in scope, and then academic books, book chapters, and other outputs that may arise from HRB-funded research are encouraged to be made as open as possible, but also as close as necessary at the time of publication. So furthermore, all articles must be published under a Creative Commons license, a CC BY license, unless a more restrictive license is exceptionally approved by the HRB. Authors or their institutions must retain their copyright, and the HRB will no longer fund open access publishing in subscription journals or hybrid journals. They are also called this way, outside of transformative agreements. So if a transformative agreement is in place, that's okay, but only in that case. And finally, while preprints are not in the scope of this policy, they are very much encouraged by the HRB. So one of the changes we've done is around the CC BY license. This is a requirement now, and we've introduced this in line with the rights retention strategy that was developed by Plan S. So as you may know, publishers many times require authors to sign exclusive agreements with that restrict what authors can do with the research findings. And rights retention actually enabled researchers to retain intellectual ownership rights through the CC BY license, and then allows researchers to publish using the green route, which would be depositing an article in an open access repository. The HRB is supporting this strategy through its HRB grant general terms and conditions, and they will reference compliance with the open access policy, which then includes rights retention statements that can be used by HRB funded authors. So here in this slide, you can see the two right retention statements that should be used by HRB grant holders when submitting an article to a publishing journal. And both of these statements can be found in the new policy. So this is a slide that was developed by Plan S, and I would like to use it to remind authors to retain their rights. So please remember that the peer review author-accepted manuscript is your intellectual creation, and it's also your valuable asset. So please, it's very important not to give this one away. Finally, the HRB is also introducing changes in its upcoming grant budget framework around HRB funding for open access publication fees. So firstly, we will have a new budget line in grant budgets. And these will be to cover open access publication costs, and will also allow us to monitor better how much funding is being used for article processing charges, or APCs. We are also increasing the contribution that we give towards these open access publishing costs to 2,200 per publication. So this is our contribution towards APCs. And we will cover up to 3 open access publications for a grant duration of around 3 to 4 years. The maximum that will be allowable to be used for this purpose will be proportionate to the scale and duration of the grant within each scheme. So as I said, this will all be included in the HRB grant budget framework. And together with the new policy, we will also make available an open access publishing guide, as well as an FAQ document. So the publishing guide will include all the steps that a researcher has to follow when publishing open access. And this will start by picking up a journal of your choice, then checking the open access publishing routes that are available through that journal. And once the right journal is found and selected, you then start your submission process. So please make sure you include the acknowledgement of HRB funding, but also the rights retention wording in your publication. Then, if applicable, you should also link your publication with any relevant open access data or software. And finally, if you choose the green open access route, please, you will have to upload your author accepted manuscript to an open access repository. And just to finalize, I would like to let you know that together with the policy, you will be able to find all the information related to open access at the HRB website. So first of all, you can already find the new policy if you go to the grant policies tab in the HRB website. And then a new site will be created in the coming weeks, and that will be under the Responsible Research Assessment tab. And in here, you will be able to find the new policy, but also the publishing guide I was talking about, and the FAQ document, and of course, also this webinar. Furthermore, we also have an open access mailbox where you can send all your queries, and you will also be able to request any licensing exception requests through this mailbox, and it is open access at hrb.ie. So please feel free to ask any questions through this mailbox. So this is all for today. I hope all the changes to our open access policy are more clear, and thank you very much for listening.